realize that, you know what, we're one cohesive, comprehensive team.
Amen. Thank you. So this leads me to
I really do want to speak on this issue.
yes, please.
I'm so sorry, but I need to speak on this issue. If you are a high school graduate and you take and pass the test in the state of New Jersey, you can be a corrections officer. In certain parts of the state of New Jersey, you could never have encountered a black man or woman in your entire educational experience. But when you go to a New Jersey prison where 67 to 70% of the inmates are black or brown, you suddenly are encountering something that you've never ever known before, never had to value, never had to have discernment about. I think one of the issues that we need to look at, because these are pretty well-paying jobs, you need to have certain training, you need to have certain exposure before you're put into those situations. And then you need to have diversity training and an appreciation for different cultures, because I find in my work, the complaints that I get in terms of the relationships, things that are happening in prisons south of Camden, Governor, as opposed to things that are in the more densely populated areas, that we're having situations and blow-ups that simply have to do because corrections officers are underprepared to deal with the populations that they have custody over, and those who are in custody have had no experience with them either. And that's a real deal. Race is a real deal in this issue.
It's also a real deal, the fact that 60 to 70% of the inmates are African American in New York and in New Jersey, and that the drug laws particularly specify and racially profile. It's a given, it's a fact that the alternatives for white kids on drugs in most cases are into the community, and the African American community is to go into the jail. So it's not only the correction officer training, it's the legislation and at point of arrest, conviction, and sentencing that is racially insensitive.
So this is one of the themes of this casework, which has been really exciting for me, has been how the theme of fairness has been deep. Because on issues of reentry, of people who are incarcerated, of people who are leaving prisons, for many, many years, you couldn't get a conversation that wasn't simply about public safety and about nothing else. And so it's been interesting for me to hear how many other additional themes are. Public safety's here, obviously. It's here as a theme, but other themes are here as well. So I want to use that as a segue to ask a question. So I've been in this business for 40 years, more than that. And I'm going to ask for a show of hands of, because I don't want to do that to people around the panel, but my guess is everybody here has been doing this for more than a decade or so. Certainly, there's a lot of 20-year vets up on this table, right? So 20 years ago, something was different about what we were trying to do. You know, the air was different, the mood was different, the problems that we had to speak to were different, the walls we faced in trying to do this reform work. So something's new now. The chance to put something in place that would make us be able to dream about New Jersey. I mean, dreaming about this issue in New Jersey 20 years ago, I don't even think we would have thought that we had permission to do that. So what's happening now, and how do we take advantage of it? For now.
I think the critical issue and this distinction between where we are now and where we were is the size and the scope of the problem and the diversity of the problem. The fact is that we, having incarcerated 2.4 million people, 1 out of 4 adults with a criminal record, this challenge reaches not only urban communities but suburban communities. And there's not a legislator that you can talk to who in their extended family, in their synagogue, in their church, in their mosque, they know someone for whom this is a problem. I think our challenge is democratizing this profoundly undemocratic problem. That is to say, to convey to people in no uncertain terms that it is not a liberal or a conservative problem, it is not a Democrat or Republican problem, not a suburban, exurban, or urban problem. It is profoundly a New Jersey and American problem. As such, we have to address it as a fundamental economic challenge. That is to say, you cannot marginalize an entire group of people. I mean, for Jason Williams to say that he is an ex-con or convicted felon, well, 9% of the American public are convicted felons. 19.8 million people. So the problem is we have reached a particular point in our democracy where we have literally marginalized an entire group of citizens. So the point being is, by talking about it in broader, more universal terms, we're able to reach more people, build this coalition, broaden the movement, and talk about fundamental change, beginning with the school-to-prison pipeline, or the preschool to prison pipeline, because the disparities begin in preschool. I think we have to move on beyond that to call for real reform, as I mentioned, in terms of collateral sanctions, and thinking about New Jersey in the context of the country. We need to call upon the President of the United States to issue an executive order banning the box with respect to federal contracts. This is already being done with respect to federal jobs. The nation's largest public employer, the federal government, and the nation's largest private employer, Walmart, are already doing this. But we've got to get federal contractors so that we fundamentally change the economic landscape so that people understand everybody deserves an opportunity to compete.
Thank you. So I think you might be able to get a lot of people to understand bandbox, and certainly here, our job would leave this room is to get somebody we know to see this issue this way, to change the community, to bring this issue here. But there's so much more here, and how do we reach the people who doubt us, the people who doubt that there's really any reason to give a second chance, the people who hold a grudge about all these folks that they don't know who've broken the law? How do we reach them? This is our community and our constituency that really is profoundly challenged. Let me start here and then I'll come.
Very, very simple example is invite them to our drug court graduation ceremony. If they want to see how a program works, firsthand you can see that that program has worked. It's probably been the best diversionary program, I think, in my lifetime that this state has. We've had a phenomenal success rate in New Jersey. I know presiding Judge Sheila Venable was here earlier on a panel. I don't know if she's still here, but kudos, Judge Venable. But if anyone really wants to see how it works, it's one of the most touching things to come to a graduation ceremony and listen to people who have had some of the most terrible things happen in their life and be able to get up and give a speech as to where they are today. To me, there's no better thing. Just show somebody the reality of that ceremony, and I think you can convince a lot of people that diversionary programs work.
I think, well, it's Holy Thursday, so I'll get a little Christian here. I think when I remember reading in the Gospels when Jesus said, visit the prisons. And I've seen so many people, and I'll piggyback on that, who weren't interested, go in and see, as opposed to they first see people as prisoners, and then they speak to them and see that they're really humans. And that's the difference. And I saw when I volunteered in jails for years, my friends would have that attitude, like, what are you doing with these people? And I've seen it in people as they end up there for different reasons, come to a drug court graduation, get invited to a master's degree graduation at Sing Sing, and it just wakes them up. It brings them, and that's the change I think we need in society. Without seeing a person as a human, they're just the other, they're evil, they're scary. It's just not true. And when you see a human behind that crime or their worst thing, I think it fundamentally changes you, and I think that's why it was in the Gospels. It's not to help the prisoner, it's really to change you.
We had at Rutgers University, we house a consortium that offers college courses in prison, and we had a problem this summer because 8 of our courses needed to be filled last minute with professors, and I called the writing program at Rutgers University in Newark, and I said, could you help? And they scrambled around and got some people to go in, and then every one of those teachers who last minute went in at his personal request from the provost wants to do it again. Every single one of them said the best teaching experience they'd ever had. Because the people who are inside prisons need and want anything that we can provide them, and they will make use of it. If you put something there that they can use to make their lives better, they will make use of it.
To convince society, our collective goal is to reduce crime. I think that should be a convincing argument. It would not only, if all of these ideas were implemented, it would reduce crime, and even Newt Gingrich has agreed that it would save money because you would have less people incarcerated. What could be more convincing to people who are frightened of crime than saying that our plans would work to reduce crime?
I agree with everything that's been
Thank you,
said, but
Shannon.
I think your last point is, I think what we're talking about is humanizing the process and humanizing the people in the process. And I think that's what gets lost a lot of times. So I know there are universities, Princeton University has a program where students are encouraged to go into, I believe it's Trenton State actually, and meet with inmates and give them literacy skills and things like that. Middlesex County Adult Correction Center has something similar. I think we could advocate for students to become involved. Maybe not high school students, but at least college students, because I think you need to bridge the gap between not only the haves and the have-nots, but between those on the inside, those on the outside. There's terrible fear and resentment and hostility and all sorts of negative emotions that really get in the way of trying to move this process forward. The only other thing that I would suggest, which isn't exactly on this point, is I think to help the reentry process, there should be real assessments of people's, when I say mental health, I'm using a very wide definition for that. So many of the people that I've dealt with for just about 40 years by now, really have mental health issues. They've gone through tremendous trauma. I mean, so many have been sexually abused. So many have experienced direct violence right in front of their eyes. I mean, things that are almost unimaginable. Seeing people shot in front of their eyes. If you don't deal with that trauma, the demons that I think somebody mentioned before, if that's not addressed, you can have the best reentry program in the world, and those demons are going to come back and haunt them over and over and over. So you need to identify them and try to address them to help people succeed.
I think that we need to have a discussion on the costs, the actual financial cost to society. I think we're at an interesting juncture right now. Everybody wants to privatize something because they recognize that there's money in prisons and there's money in education, and the way to make that money is to privatize. So instead of trying to burst forth this industry of private prisons and prison-like environments, we need to have the discussion in terms of the actual costs associated with a failed system. Because it costs $50-some thousand to incarcerate a person, to have that person out and become one of the 67% to return to prison, and we've gotten nothing for it as citizens, as tax-paying citizens. If people don't understand the social justice of the issue, and if they don't understand the motivation of the Bible and the works of Jesus, they understand the cost associated with it. And in the legislature, one of the ways we got them to work on some of the issues that we put forth, Senator Cunningham and I put forth 6 years ago, before this was even the issue of the day, was to cast that discussion in counting the cost. So it's not just the social justice cost. Some people only understand dollars and cents, and we got to have them recognize it is cheaper to educate them and get